Welcome back, everyone. Today, we are going to talk about something very important, something that many English learners underestimate, but that is actually one of the most powerful skills you can develop if you want to speak naturally and connect with people. We are talking about small talk in English. This is not about complex grammar or advanced vocabulary. This is about simple conversations, everyday interactions, the kind of communication that happens in real life when you meet someone, when you are in a cafe, at work, in a taxi, or even waiting in line somewhere. Now, Sophie, let me ask you something very simple to begin this discussion. Why do you think small talk is so important? Because many learners focus only on grammar, tenses, or vocabulary, but they struggle when it comes to real conversations. They don't know how to start a discussion, how to keep it going, or how to make it feel natural. What is your perspective on this?
Yes, Lucas, I completely agree with you. Small talk is often underestimated because it seems simple, but in reality, it is one of the most important skills in communication. It is the first step in any relationship, whether it is personal or professional. If you can handle small talk, you can create connections, build trust, and open doors in many areas of life.
From my experience, one of the biggest problems is that learners are afraid of speaking without preparation. They want to build perfect sentences, but small talk is not about perfection. It is about connection. It is about showing interest, asking simple questions, and reacting naturally. And this is something that cannot be learned only from books. It requires practice and confidence.
To answer your question, I think small talk is important because it helps people feel comfortable. When you meet someone and start with simple questions, you create a relaxed atmosphere. This makes communication easier and more natural. Without small talk, conversations can feel cold or awkward.
Let's take a very simple situation. Imagine you meet someone for the first time. You don't start with a complex sentence. You start with something simple like, "Hi, how are you?" or "Nice to meet you." Then you can ask, "Where are you from?" or "What do you do?" These are basic questions, but they open the door to conversation.
You are also right about fear. Many learners are afraid of making mistakes, and this stops them from speaking. But the truth is, mistakes are part of learning. People understand you even if your English is not perfect. What matters is your effort and your willingness to communicate.
Another important aspect of small talk is listening. Many people think speaking is the most important part, but listening is just as important. If you listen carefully, you can react naturally. For example, if someone says, "I had a busy day," you can respond, "Oh, really? What did you do?" This keeps the conversation alive.
About simplicity, I think this is one of the most important points. Many learners try to use difficult words, but they don't need to. Simple sentences are more effective. For example, "I like sports," "I work in a company," "I enjoy cooking." These sentences are easy, but they are enough to start a conversation.
Now, Sophie, let's talk about fear. Many learners are afraid of making mistakes, and this fear stops them from speaking. They stay silent, even when they have something to say. What advice can we give to help them overcome this fear and start speaking more freely? Another key point is simplicity. You don't need complicated sentences to have a good conversation. You can say, "I like music," "I enjoy traveling," "I work in finance." These simple sentences are enough to communicate. The goal is not to impress, but to connect.
I also want to emphasize the importance of listening. Like you said, communication is not only about speaking. If you listen carefully, you can ask better questions and respond more naturally. This makes the conversation flow smoothly.
We should also talk about common topics in small talk. People often talk about the weather, work, hobbies, weekend activities, or daily life. These topics are safe, easy, and universal. For example, "The weather is nice today," or "What do you usually do on weekends?"
Now about topics. I agree that safe topics are very useful. Talking about the weather, work, hobbies, or daily life is a good way to start. These topics are neutral and comfortable for most people.
Now let's imagine a real conversation. If someone says, "I like traveling," you can ask, "Where do you usually go?" or "What is your favorite place?" This is how you develop the conversation step by step.
For people who don't know what to say, I would suggest a simple technique. Always ask follow-up questions. If someone says something, ask more about it. For example, if they say, "I like music," you can ask, What kind of music do you like? This keeps the conversation alive.
Another important thing is showing interest. When you speak with someone, you should not only talk about yourself, you should ask questions, react, and show that you are listening. This makes the conversation more balanced and more enjoyable.
Another important thing is body language. Smiling, making eye contact, and having a relaxed posture can make a big difference. Even if your English is not perfect, your attitude can make the conversation successful. I also think practice is essential. You cannot improve your small talk if you don't practice. Try to speak with people, even for a few minutes. Every conversation is an opportunity to improve.
Now, Sophie, what about people who say, I don't know what to say? This is something we hear a lot. Many learners feel blocked. They don't know how to continue a conversation. What strategy can we give them to keep the conversation going?
And finally, I want to say that small talk is a skill that grows over time. The more you practice, the more comfortable you become. One day, you will speak naturally without thinking too much.
And finally, for this part, I want to say something important. Small talk is not small. It is a big skill. It is the foundation of communication. If you master small talk, you can speak with anyone, anywhere, and build relationships naturally.
Because at the end of the day, small talk is not about language only. It is about connection, confidence, and communication.
Now that we have understood the basics of small talk, let's go deeper into real-life situations where you can actually use it. Because learning phrases is one thing, but knowing when and how to use them is what really makes the difference. Imagine you are at work, maybe in an office, and you arrive in the morning. You see a colleague, and you don't want to stay silent. This is a perfect moment for small talk. You can simply say, "Good morning, how are you today?" And from there, the conversation can start naturally.
Yes, Lucas, these are very important points, especially when we talk about real-life situations. In a professional environment, the key is balance. You want to be friendly, but you also want to remain respectful and professional. For example, instead of asking very personal questions, you can focus on neutral topics like work, projects, or general well-being. Saying, "How is your day going?" or "Are you working on something interesting?" is a good way to start.
Now, Sophie, let me ask you something more specific. In a professional environment, how can someone use small talk without sounding too informal or too personal? Because this is something many learners struggle with. They don't know how to find the right balance between being friendly and being professional. What would you say is the best approach in this kind of situation?
I also think that first impressions are very important in small talk. When you meet someone for the first time, your attitude matters as much as your words. A smile, a friendly tone, and simple questions can create a positive connection very quickly.
Another important situation is when you are meeting someone new for the first time, maybe at an event, a conference, or even a casual meeting. The beginning of the conversation is always the most difficult part. But once you break the ice, everything becomes easier. You can start with something simple like, "Hi, is this your first time here?" Or, "What do you think about this event?" These types of questions are easy and natural.
About starting conversations, I agree with you. The beginning is often the hardest part, but simple questions make it easier. You don't need to be creative or original. Simple and natural is always better. Transitions are also something learners need to practice. Like you said, it is not enough to ask one question. You need to continue the conversation. And this can be done by reacting to what the other person says and asking follow-up questions.
We should also talk about transitions in conversation. Many learners can start a conversation, but they don't know how to continue. This is where linking ideas becomes important. For example, if someone says they had a busy day, you can transition by asking, "Was it stressful?" Or, "Do you usually have busy days?" These small transitions help maintain the flow. Now let's talk about tone again, but in a different way. Small talk should feel light, relaxed, and natural. It is not a serious discussion, so your tone should reflect that. You don't need to sound formal all the time. You can smile, laugh a little, and show your personality.
I really like what you said about tone. Small talk should feel relaxed. If you sound too serious, the conversation can feel uncomfortable, so it is important to stay light and natural. About waiting situations, I think this is a great opportunity for practice. Many people stay silent in these moments, but they can actually use them to improve their communication skills. Even a simple comment can start a conversation.
Another situation where small talk is very useful is when you are waiting, for example, at a bus stop, in a queue, or in a waiting room. These moments are perfect opportunities to practice. You can say something simple like, "It's taking a long time today," or "The weather is really hot today." These comments can start a conversation easily. Now, Sophie, what about cultural differences? Because small talk is not exactly the same in every country. In some cultures, people speak more freely, and in others, they are more reserved. How can learners adapt their small talk depending on the context and the culture they are in?
Cultural differences are very important. In some countries, people are very open and talkative, while in others, people are more reserved. So learners need to observe and adapt. If people around you are open, you can be more expressive. If they are more reserved, you should be more careful. Reacting naturally is also a key skill. Communication is not just about speaking, it is about interaction. Showing interest, smiling, or reacting emotionally makes the conversation more engaging.
Another important element is reacting naturally. Small talk is not a script, it is a dynamic interaction. So you need to react to what the other person says. If they say something interesting, show curiosity. If they say something funny, you can laugh. These reactions make the conversation more alive. Let's also talk about asking open questions. Instead of asking questions that lead to yes or no answers, try to ask questions that encourage longer responses. For example, instead of asking, "Do you like your job?" you can ask, "What do you like about your job?" This creates a deeper conversation.
Open questions are very powerful. They give the other person space to speak and share more information. This makes the conversation richer and more interesting. I also like your example of a full conversation. It shows clearly how small talk works in real life. Step by step, question by question, the conversation grows naturally.
Now imagine a full small talk exchange. One person says, "I went to the beach this weekend," and you respond, "Oh, really? That sounds nice. Where did you go?" Then they answer, and you continue with another question. This is how conversations grow naturally. Another thing we should mention is energy. Your energy affects the conversation. If you speak with low energy, the conversation may feel flat. But if you show interest and positivity, the other person will respond in the same way. Now, Sophie, let's talk about people who are introverted. Not everyone is naturally talkative. Some people prefer silence. How can they practice small talk without feeling uncomfortable or forced? And finally, for this part, I want to emphasize something very important. Small talk is not about being perfect. It is about being present, being human, and being willing to communicate. The more you practice, the more natural it becomes.
About introverted people, I think it is important to start small. You don't need to have long conversations. Even a few sentences are enough. With time, confidence will grow. And finally, I agree with your conclusion. Small talk is not about perfection. It is about connection. The more you practice, the more natural it becomes, and the easier it feels.